Picture a valley tucked into what is now Belgium. Rolling hills, sleepy villages, livestock wandering aimlessly. And on one side, a minor principality called Hesse-Hanau, whose army wasn't much more than a handful of farmers in ill-fitting uniforms. And on the other, the city-state of Burgundy, full of burly men who thought they were generals but were really just professional line-standers with muskets. Both sides were arguing over a single bridge. Yes, a bridge. A stone bridge that barely allowed two carriages to pass at once. Hesse-Hanau's commander, a wiry fellow named Friedrich von Knopf, had a wild glint in his eye that suggested either genius or imminent catastrophe. He was obsessed with discipline and drill, and he had a very peculiar habit of talking to his cannons like they were pets. "Come on, Blitzen, don't embarrass me in front of Burgundy," he would whisper, patting the barrel affectionately. Burgundy, meanwhile, was led by Marquis de Chantilly, a man whose proudest achievement was once riding a horse through a tavern door during a bet. He believed in intimidation tactics that mostly involved shouting and waving his sword around like a toddler discovering finger paint. And so, on a crisp autumn morning, both armies lined up, musket smoke drifting over the fields, bugles screaming, the usual chaos. Everyone was sure someone would die, because that's how wars work.
But then, something happened. Something utterly absurd. At dawn, as the first cannon fired, a figure appeared on the hillside near Hesse-Hanau. Tall, robed, glowing faintly in the mist. And it waved, slowly, very slowly, like it had all the time in the world and absolutely no respect for the laws of physics. To the soldiers of Hesse-Hanau, it looked like a man. To Burgundy, it looked like the literal embodiment of their worst nightmares. Some claimed it was a spectral monk. Others whispered an avenging soldier who had died a week prior under suspiciously stupid circumstances. No one could agree, which, if you've ever spent any time around people armed with muskets, is the fastest way to panic. And panic they did. Imagine you've been marching in formation for 3 hours, your feet blistered, your uniform itchy, and suddenly there's a glowing figure floating above a hill, staring at you like it just solved calculus in its head. That's when your perfectly rational brain tells you, maybe I should just drop my musket and go home.
Apparently, a Hesse-Hanau soldier named Klaus Menden had been telling stories in the barracks about a monk who had been executed centuries earlier for something complicated involving a goat, 3 coins, and a very confusing prophecy. Klaus insisted that if the armies ever tried to fight over that bridge, the ghost would appear to end it. Everyone laughed, naturally. Soldiers laugh at warnings until death is involved. And then, of course, the ghost appeared. Not as a joke, not as a metaphor, not as a vague, maybe we shouldn't fight. It floated there, as real as a cannonball about to hit your face. Witnesses later described its features in ways that could only be called horribly specific and unnerving. Glowing eyes, robe tattered as if caught in a wind that didn't exist, hands stretched unnaturally long, fingers curling and uncurling in a rhythm that made your teeth ache. Some even swore it whispered, but in a language no one could comprehend, somewhere between Latin and a drunk chicken.
Burgundy, on seeing this apparition, immediately assumed divine intervention, or at the very least, that Hesse-Hanau had secretly hired a wizard with a penchant for special effects. Orders were given to retreat, officers tripped over their own swords, and men began dropping muskets and running. Meanwhile, Hesse-Hanau, being slightly braver or slightly dumber, depending on who you ask, watched the same ghost and decided, yep, that's our new general now. Morale inexplicably increased. Soldiers followed every spectral movement as if the ghost had a cunning battle plan. Within hours, what was supposed to be a prolonged battle ended with no deaths. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Historians have struggled to explain this. Some blame mass hysteria. Others believe both armies simply used the ghost as a socially acceptable excuse to go home. And then, of course, there are those who swear it was a ghost and it absolutely knew what it was doing.
The ghost was said to be Friar Bernhardt, a monk executed in 1672 for allegedly predicting the downfall of every ruler who ignored the sanctity of that bridge. Bernhardt's life before death was tedious. He spent his days copying manuscripts, arguing with novice monks over proper ink ratios, and secretly knitting tiny boots for his cat. Then, one day, he supposedly angered the local bishop by publicly stating, "If any army ever fights here, the ghosts will do what men refuse." The bishop didn't respond with logic or conversation. He had Bernhardt executed, because 17th century problem-solving mostly involved swords and scaffolds. Upon death, Bernhardt's spirit didn't go quietly. Accounts claim that the execution left him with a grudge so specific it could only manifest above a bridge. His robes forever fluttering in a non-existent wind, eyes glowing with the patience of a man who had spent too many hours copying manuscripts and listening to novice monks complain. Transformation complete. Friar Bernhardt became a ghostly general whose sole purpose was preventing unnecessary bloodshed. Ironically, this made him one of the most effective military leaders in European history.
The bridge, now nicknamed Bernhardt's Crossing, became a minor pilgrimage site for soldiers and travelers alike. People told stories, "If you see the glowing monk, you should stop fighting immediately," which became a sort of proto-peace treaty. Local clergy even held ceremonies to honor him, though suspiciously, they never mentioned the goat prophecy again. This story endured not because people believed in ghosts. It endured because it explains how something completely absurd could suddenly prevent countless deaths. Imagine, in an era obsessed with honor, bravery, and bloodshed, the solution to war was a spectral man silently waving.
Let's pause and consider. War, for centuries, is basically humans trying to prove who has the bigger stick. And the moment a guy who's technically dead shows up, suddenly the stick loses all meaning. Nothing says stop fighting like an apparition that could, with a gesture, unseat your entire understanding of reality. And, of course, human nature being what it is, later historians added embellishments. Some claimed Bernhardt levitated cannons. Others swore he screamed Latin insults that turned enemy soldiers' stomachs upside down. Modern historians shrug and say, yeah, that probably didn't happen, or maybe it did. Either way, it's a perfect example of how absurdity and terror sometimes solve conflicts faster than strategy manuals or treaties ever could.
Fast forward a few centuries. Military academies rarely teach how to surrender to ghosts, which is a shame. Imagine the efficiency. One apparition, 0 casualties, morale skyrocketing for one side, terror-induced retreat for the other, all over a stupid bridge. Historians love to debate. Was it hysteria, coincidence, or a literal ghost? And the truth is, we'll never know. But the locals, they'll tell you the same thing every time. If you cross Bernhardt's bridge at dawn, stand still. You might just save a few lives. Think about that. Entire war ended because someone somewhere saw something floating, glowing, and vaguely annoyed. Humanity, at its finest.
So, what's the takeaway? Armies spend decades studying strategy, leaders write thousands of words about diplomacy,
And what ends the war? A dead monk, waving on a hill. And honestly, that's comforting in a way. Sometimes all it takes is a little absurdity to prevent catastrophe. Sometimes ghosts are the most competent generals of all. Which one freaked you out the most? The sheer absurdity? The glowing robes? The fact that an entire army just ran because of one man-shaped light? I mean, really, how do you even argue with that?